On the night Elena Moretti became a Mafia bride, she buried her husband in a pool of his own blood. Now she's locked in a mansion with the one man who blames her for everything, Dante DeLuca, the scarred, silent brother who watched her walk down the aisle with murder in his eyes. He could kill her. He should kill her. But there's something darker brewing in the space between hatred and obsession, something that began long before vows were spoken, and it's about to consume them both. Want to see how far this story reaches? Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments below. Now, let's begin. The chandelier above Elena's head cost more than her childhood home. She knew this because Marco had told her, his breath warm against her ear as he'd pulled her close during the reception. "Everything here is yours now," he'd whispered, and she'd forced herself to smile like a woman who believed him. The ballroom pulsed with music and laughter, dozens of men in expensive suits toasting to a marriage that had been negotiated in back rooms she'd never seen. Elena stood beside her new husband, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm, and tried to ignore the weight of eyes on her skin. Marco DeLuca was handsome in the way powerful men often were, confident, polished, dangerous beneath the charm. When he looked at her, she saw possession, not love. But love hadn't been part of the arrangement. Her father had made that clear 3 months ago, when he'd sat her down in their cramped kitchen and explained that the family owed a debt, a significant debt, the kind that didn't get resolved with payment plans or apologies. "Marco DeLuca wants a wife," her father had said, not meeting her eyes. "Someone clean, someone outside the life. He's offering to clear everything if you agree." Elena had stared at the man who'd raised her, searching for some sign of regret, some flicker of paternal protection. She'd found nothing but relief. So she'd said yes, because the alternative was watching her younger sister take her place, or worse, watching her family disappear into the kind of debt that left bodies in rivers. Now, surrounded by crystal and champagne and men who smiled with too many teeth, Elena played her part. She laughed at jokes she didn't understand. She accepted congratulations from strangers. She let Marco's hand rest possessively on her lower back and told herself this was safety. This was survival. She almost believed it. Then she felt the other gaze. It came from across the room, heavy and cold, like the barrel of a gun pressed against the base of her skull. Elena turned slowly, scanning the crowd, until she found him. Dante DeLuca. Marco's younger brother stood in the shadows near the bar, half his face hidden in darkness. Where Marco was polished, Dante was raw. A scar cut through his left eyebrow and down his cheek, pulling at the corner of his mouth in a way that made every expression look like a sneer. His suit fit him wrong, like he'd rather be wearing something he could fight in. And he was staring at her with such concentrated hatred that Elena felt her breath catch. She'd met him once before, briefly, during the engagement dinner. He hadn't said a word to her, hadn't acknowledged her presence beyond a single, cutting glance. Marco had laughed it off. "My brother doesn't believe in pleasantries," he'd said. "Don't take it personally." But this felt personal. Elena broke eye contact first, turning back to Marco with a smile that felt like it might crack her face. "Who's that?" she asked, keeping her voice light. "The man at the bar?" Marco followed her gaze and his expression shifted, something complicated passing through his eyes. Pride, maybe, or resentment. "That's Dante, my little brother. He doesn't seem happy." "Dante's never happy." Marco's hand tightened on her waist, pulling her closer. "He thinks I'm making a mistake, bringing an outsider into the family." "Am I? A mistake?" Marco looked down at her, and for a moment something almost genuine flickered in his face. "No," he said quietly. "You're exactly what I need." What he needed, not what he wanted, the distinction should have bothered her more than it did. The music shifted, something slower, and Marco led her onto the dance floor. Elena went willingly, grateful for the movement, for something to do with her hands. They swayed together, his arms around her waist, her hands on his shoulders, and she tried to feel something other than numb acceptance. "After tonight," Marco murmured, "everything changes. You'll be protected. No one touches a DeLuca wife. No one even looks at you wrong." Elena nodded against his chest. Protection. That's what this was. That's what it had to be. The song ended. Marco kissed her forehead, and the crowd applauded, and Elena felt like she was watching herself from very far away. Then the lights went out. For a heartbeat, there was only confused laughter. Someone called out about the breakers. Someone else made a joke about the DJ. Elena felt Marco's grip on her tighten, his body going rigid against hers. "Get down," he said, his voice completely different now, hard, commanding. She didn't have time to ask why. The first gunshot shattered the chandelier above their heads. Glass rained down in a crystal storm as the room erupted into chaos. Screams, running, more gunshots, coming fast now, muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness like lightning. Marco shoved Elena hard, sending her sprawling across the floor, and she hit the marble with enough force to knock the air from her lungs. "Stay down!" Marco shouted, but he wasn't looking at her anymore. He was reaching into his jacket, pulling out a gun, turning toward the door where shapes were moving in the darkness. Elena tried to breathe, tried to think. Her ears were ringing, her hands scraped and bloody from catching herself on broken glass. Around her, the wedding guests were scattering like startled birds, some running for exits, others dropping to the floor, a few pulling out weapons of their own. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was a wedding, her wedding. She was supposed to be safe now. Another volley of gunfire. Closer this time. Elena saw Marco move, saw him raise his weapon, saw the determination in his face as he stepped forward to meet the attack. She saw the moment the bullet found him. It happened so fast. 1 second he was standing, strong and certain. The next he was stumbling backward, his gun clattering to the floor, his hand pressed to his chest where dark blood was already spreading across his white shirt. "Marco!" Elena screamed, and she didn't recognize her own voice. He fell, just collapsed like someone had cut his strings, hitting the floor hard enough that she heard it over the gunfire. Elena crawled toward him, her dress tearing on the broken glass, her hand slipping in something wet and warm. Blood. So much blood. She reached him and pressed her hands to the wound, trying to stop the flow, trying to do something, anything. Marco's eyes found hers, wide and shocked, and his mouth moved but no sound came out. "You're okay," Elena heard herself saying, the words automatic, meaningless. "You're gonna be okay. Just hold on. Just—" Marco's hand found hers, gripping tight enough to hurt. His lips moved again, forming words she couldn't hear over the chaos. Then his eyes went unfocused, his grip loosened, and Elena felt the exact moment he left. She'd never felt anyone die before. Didn't know it would be like this, like watching a light switch off, instant and irreversible. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Hands grabbed her from behind, yanking her away from Marco's body. Elena fought on instinct, twisting and kicking, but whoever held her was stronger, much stronger. "Stop fighting," a voice growled in her ear. Male, cold, familiar. Dante. He hauled her backward across the ballroom floor, dragging her through the chaos like she weighed nothing. Elena's vision blurred with tears and shock, her hands still sticky with Marco's blood. She saw bodies on the floor, saw men in suits firing at shapes in the doorway, saw the wedding cake toppled and destroyed, white frosting mixing with red. "Let me go!" she screamed, finding her voice finally. "Marco, we have to—" "He's dead," Dante said flatly. "And you're coming with me." He kicked open a side door and pulled her through into a hallway, away from the gunfire and screaming. The door slammed shut behind them, muffling the worst of the noise, and Dante finally released her. Elena stumbled, catching herself against the wall, her legs shaking so badly she could barely stand. "What?" She couldn't form a complete sentence. "What's happening?" Dante didn't answer. He was checking his own weapon, his movements efficient and practiced, his face completely expressionless. The scar on his cheek caught the emergency lighting, making him look even more dangerous. "We have to go back," Elena said, her voice breaking. "Marco, someone has to—" "Marco's dead," Dante repeated, and the lack of emotion in his voice was worse than grief would have been. "There's nothing to go back for. He's your brother." "I'm aware." The words hit Elena like a slap. She stared at this man, this stranger who'd just watched his brother die, and showed less feeling than she would for a broken plate. "How can you—" "Because this is what happens," Dante cut her off, finally looking at her directly. "This is the life. This is what you married into. Did you think the dress and the party made it real, made it safe?" Elena's hands were shaking. She looked down and saw Marco's blood covering her palms, dark and drying, and felt something crack inside her chest. "Who did this?" she whispered. "Does it matter?" "Yes!" Dante's jaw tightened. For a second, something flickered in his eyes. Rage, maybe, or pain buried so deep it barely showed. "The Vitale family. Marco's been at war with them for months. They waited until tonight because they knew we'd have everyone here. One strike to take out the entire leadership." "But you're here." "I'm hard to kill." The gunfire in the ballroom had stopped. The sudden silence was somehow worse than the noise had been. Elena pressed her bloody hands against her stomach, trying to hold herself together, trying to process what had just happened. She'd been married for less than 3 hours. Now she was a widow. Dante's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression darkening further. "We need to move. They'll sweep the building." "Where?" "Somewhere you won't get killed in the next 5 minutes." He grabbed her arm again, not gently. "Come on." Elena let him pull her down the hallway because she didn't know what else to do. Her mind was static in shock, unable to grasp onto anything solid. This morning she'd been getting ready for her wedding. This afternoon she'd said vows. This evening she'd danced with her husband. Now he was dead, and she was running through a mansion with a man who looked at her like she was the enemy. Dante led her through a maze of corridors, moving with the confidence of someone who'd grown up here. They passed more bodies, guards, she realized, men who'd been stationed throughout the house. All dead, all killed quickly and professionally. "How many?" Elena asked, her voice hollow. "How many what?" "How many people died tonight?" Dante glanced back at her, and something in his expression shifted. Not quite sympathy, but maybe recognition. "Too many." He stopped at a heavy wooden door, pulling out a key and unlocking it quickly. The room beyond was small and windowless, some kind of safe room or storage area. Dante pushed Elena inside and followed, locking the door behind them. The space was barely 10 feet square, lined with shelves holding supplies. Water, canned food, medical kits. A single light fixture buzzed overhead, casting everything in harsh white light. Elena backed against the far wall and slowly slid down to sit on the floor. Her legs finally gave out completely, folding beneath her like paper. She stared at her bloody hands and tried to remember how to breathe. Dante stood by the door, listening. His gun was still in his hand, held with casual competence. After a moment, he seemed satisfied that they weren't being followed immediately and turned his attention to Elena. "Take off the dress," he said. Elena's head snapped up. "What?" "The dress. It's covered in blood and it's white. You might as well be wearing a target. There's clean clothes in the cabinet." He said it so matter-of-factly, like he was commenting on the weather. Elena looked down at herself and saw he was right. Her wedding dress was ruined, soaked in Marco's blood, torn from being dragged across the floor. Her wedding dress. She'd spent hours choosing it, had stood in front of mirrors while seamstresses pinned and adjusted, had imagined, despite everything, that maybe it meant something. Now it was just evidence of death. Elena's hands shook as she tried to reach the zipper. She couldn't feel her fingers properly, couldn't make them work. "I can't," she whispered. Dante made an impatient sound and crossed the room. Elena flinched as he reached for her, but he just grabbed the zipper and yanked it down with zero ceremony. The dress loosened, falling forward off her shoulders. "Now take it off," he said, stepping back. Elena stood on shaking legs and let the dress fall. She stood there in her slip and stockings, covered in her dead husband's blood, and felt nothing. Just vast, empty nothing. Dante pulled clothes from the cabinet, jeans, a t-shirt, a jacket. He tossed them to her without looking. "Hurry up." She dressed mechanically, her movements automatic. The clothes were too big, clearly meant for a man, but they were clean and dark, and they didn't smell like death. When she was done, Dante handed her a bottle of water and some paper towels. "Clean your hands." Elena scrubbed at the blood until her skin was red and raw, but she could still see it, still feel it. She wondered if she'd ever feel clean again. "What happens now?" she asked when her hands were as clean as they were going to get. Dante leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, studying her with those cold, unreadable eyes. "Now you tell me what you know." "About what?" "About the attack. About who Marco was meeting with. About anything that might explain why the Vitales chose tonight." Elena stared at him. I don't know anything. I was just, you were just playing dress up, Dante finished, his voice dripping with contempt. Right, the innocent outsider, the clean wife Marco thought would make him look legitimate. I didn't ask for this, Elena said, anger finally breaking through the shock. I didn't choose any of this. No? Your father didn't trade you for a debt? You didn't agree to marry a man you'd met twice because it solved your family's problems? Each word was a blade, cutting with surgical precision. Elena felt her face burn. What was I supposed to do? Let them kill my family? So you let Marco make you his instead. Dante pushed off the wall, moving closer. How noble. You don't know anything about me. I know exactly what you are. His voice was quiet now, which somehow made it worse. You're a pretty face Marco bought to play house, a decoration, and now you're a liability. Elena stood her ground even though he was close enough that she could see the muscle jumping in his jaw, could smell gunpowder and something darker. A liability? Marco's widow, the grieving bride. Every enemy we have will want to use you or kill you, probably both. And I'm stuck keeping you alive. I didn't ask you to. You didn't ask for anything, Dante interrupted. That's your problem. You just let things happen to you. Well, congratulations. Things are about to get a lot worse, and you don't get to hide behind innocence anymore. Elena's hands clenched into fists. My husband just died. I watched him bleed out in front of me, so excuse me for not being hardened enough for your taste. Something flickered across Dante's face, there and gone too fast to identify. He turned away, moving back to the door. Your husband was my brother, and I'm going to kill every single person responsible for what happened tonight. That's what matters. Not your feelings, not your trauma, just the work. He was your brother, Elena repeated, but you don't seem… What? Dante spun back, and for the first time, she saw real emotion break through his control. Rage, hot and barely contained. I don't seem upset? I don't seem sad? You want me to cry? You want me to fall apart? Elena took a step back. I learned a long time ago that feelings get you killed, Dante continued, his voice tight. Marco knew that. He lived that. And he still let his guard down tonight because he was too busy playing the loving husband. So no, I'm not going to mourn him like you think I should. I'm going to make the people who killed him regret ever being born. The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. Elena realized she was pressing herself against the wall, her heart pounding, every instinct screaming that this man was dangerous. But he hadn't hurt her. He'd pulled her out of the chaos. He was keeping her safe, even if he clearly hated doing it. Why? She asked quietly. Why what? Why protect me? If I'm just a liability, if you hate me that much, why not just leave me? Dante looked at her for a long moment. In the harsh overhead light, she could see that the scar on his face wasn't just from one injury. It was layered, old damage that had never healed quite right. Someone had hurt him badly, a long time ago, and he'd survived it. Because Marco would want me to, he finally said, and because leaving you would be the easy thing. I don't do easy. Before Elena could respond, his phone buzzed again. Dante checked it, his expression hardening. The estate's clear, he said. We're moving you to the main house. What about… Elena swallowed hard. What about Marco's body? Being handled. You should do what I tell you, Dante cut her off. From now on, you don't go anywhere without my permission. You don't talk to anyone I haven't cleared. You don't even breathe without checking with me first. Understand? Elena wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he couldn't just imprison her, couldn't just dictate her entire existence. But the blood still drying under her fingernails reminded her that the world she'd known 3 hours ago no longer existed. I understand, she said. Good. Dante unlocked the door and checked the hallway. Stay close. Don't touch anything. Don't talk. He let her out, and Elena followed, because what else could she do? The walk through the mansion was surreal. Emergency lights cast everything in red shadow. Bodies had been removed from the main areas, but Elena could still see bloodstains on the marble floors, bullet holes in the walls. The beautiful ballroom where she'd been married was destroyed, tables overturned, decorations shredded, the chandelier lying in pieces across the floor. Guards were posted throughout the house now, armed men who nodded to Dante and ignored Elena completely. She felt invisible, a ghost in clothes that didn't fit, drifting through the wreckage of her own wedding. Dante brought her to a wing she hadn't seen before. Private family quarters, she guessed. He stopped at a heavy door and unlocked it with another key from his collection. "This was going to be your suite," he said, pushing it open. "Marco had it prepared. You'll stay here." The rooms beyond were stunning, all white and gold, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking gardens she couldn't see in the darkness. A massive bed dominated the main room, still perfectly made, untouched. Wedding gifts were stacked neatly on a table, wrapped in silver and white. Gifts for a bride who'd lasted 3 hours. Elena walked in slowly, taking in the space that should have been hers. That would have been hers in another life. In a life where bullets didn't tear through celebrations and blood didn't stain white marble. "The windows are bulletproof," Dante said from the doorway. "There's a panic button by the bed. Guards outside 24/7. You're safe here." "Safe," Elena repeated. The word felt meaningless. "As safe as you can be." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was almost careful. "There's food in the kitchen, medical supplies in the bathroom if you need them. Get some rest. Tomorrow we deal with the mess." He started to leave. "Dante?" Elena said, and was surprised when he stopped. "I'm sorry about Marco. I know you don't want to hear it, but I'm sorry." Dante's shoulders tensed. He didn't turn around. "So am I." Then he was gone, the door closing with a final click, and Elena was alone. She stood in the center of the pristine bedroom and looked down at her hands. Still not clean, still stained. She wondered how long it would take for the feeling to fade, the weight of Marco's blood, the sound of his last breath, the absolute certainty that her life as she'd known it was over. Tomorrow, Dante had said, tomorrow they'd deal with the mess. But Elena had the horrible feeling that the mess was only just beginning. She walked to the bathroom and found it as immaculate as the bedroom, all white marble and gold fixtures. She turned on the shower, hot enough to burn, and stripped off the borrowed clothes, stood under the spray until her skin was raw and the water ran clear. But even then she could still feel it, the blood, the death. The weight of a choice made months ago in her father's kitchen when she'd said yes to saving her family and signed away her life. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel that cost more than her old wardrobe, she found clothes laid out on the bed. Women's clothes this time, soft pants, a sweater, everything in her size. Someone had been watching, planning, making sure she'd have what she needed, making sure she'd be comfortable in her cage. Elena dressed and sat on the edge of the massive bed. Outside the bulletproof windows, dawn was starting to break, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink. A new day. The first day of her new life. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, the one possession she still had from before. She pulled it out with shaking hands and saw dozens of messages. Her mother, her sister, friends from her old life. "Are you okay? What happened? We heard about the wedding. Please call us." Elena stared at the messages and realized she didn't know how to answer. How could she explain that she'd been married and widowed in the same night? That she was trapped in a mansion with a man who looked at her with hatred in his eyes? That she'd felt her husband die and still couldn't process what that meant? She started to type a response, then stopped. The door opened without warning. Elena looked up to find Dante standing there, his expression dark. "Give me the phone," he said. "What?" "Your phone. Give it to me. Now." Elena clutched it tighter. "This is mine. You can't." Dante crossed the room in 3 strides and plucked it from her hands before she could react. Elena jumped up, anger flaring. "You have no right. I have every right." He scrolled through her messages, his jaw tight. "Your family's been calling, texting, wanting to know if you're safe. So let me tell them, no." He deleted something, his movements sharp and decisive. "As of now, you're cut off. No contact with anyone outside this house, no calls, no messages, no emails, nothing." Elena felt her stomach drop. "You can't isolate me like that." "I can, and I am." Dante looked up from the phone, and the coldness in his eyes made her breath catch. "Your father sold you to save his own skin. Your family let you marry into this life without a second thought. They don't get to hear from you now. They don't get to know you're alive." "They'll worry." "Oh, good." Let them. He pocketed her phone. Maybe it'll teach them that actions have consequences. Elena's hands clenched into fists. I hate you. Join the club. Dante moved toward the door. Someone will bring you breakfast. Stay in your room. Don't try to leave. Don't try to contact anyone. Just exist quietly for a while. And if I don't? He paused, looking back at her. Then I'll make you. And trust me, you don't want that. The door closed. Locked. Elena heard the click and felt the full weight of her situation crash down. She was a prisoner, the grieving widow, locked away in a gilded cage, guarded by a man who hated her for reasons she didn't understand. Marco was dead. Her family was gone. And she was completely, utterly alone. Elena sank back onto the bed and finally let herself cry. Great shaking sobs that tore through her chest and left her gasping. She cried for Marco, who she'd barely known but hadn't deserved to die. She cried for herself, for the naive girl who'd thought she could trade her freedom for safety and come out whole. She cried for the future that had been ripped away before it even began. When the tears finally stopped, she lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling, exhausted and empty. Outside, the sun continued to rise. The estate came to life. She could hear voices, movement, the sounds of people going about their business. But in her room, there was only silence, and the growing certainty that Dante DeLuca was going to be either her salvation or her destruction. She just didn't know which yet. 3 days passed before Elena saw Dante again. 3 days locked in rooms that grew smaller with each hour, meals delivered by silent guards who wouldn't meet her eyes, nothing to do but pace and think and remember things she desperately wanted to forget. She'd tried the door on the first day, locked from the outside. Tried the windows. They didn't open. Tried screaming. No one came. By the third day, she'd stopped trying anything at all. She was sitting on the floor by the window, knees pulled to her chest, watching rain streak down the bulletproof glass when the lock clicked. Elena didn't bother turning around. Just another meal she wouldn't eat. Another reminder that she existed at someone else's mercy. You look like hell, Dante said. Elena's head snapped around. He stood in the doorway, dressed in black, his hair wet from the rain. There was blood on his knuckles, fresh, still red, and he looked exhausted in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. 3 days, Elena said, her voice hoarse from disuse. You locked me in here for 3 days. I've been busy. Doing what? Forgetting I exist? Dante's jaw tightened. He stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. Burying my brother. Hunting the people who killed him. Keeping the family from tearing itself apart. Take your pick. Elena pushed herself to her feet, her legs unsteady. You could have told me that. You could have... Could have what? Kept you updated? Made you feel included? Dante's laugh was sharp and humorless. You're not part of this. You're just something I have to deal with. The words shouldn't have hurt. Elena had heard worse from him already, but something about the casual cruelty, the complete dismissal, made her throat tight. Then let me go, she said. If I'm such a burden, just let me leave. Can't do that. Why not? Dante crossed his arms, leaning against the wall. He looked at her the way someone might look at a complicated problem they hadn't figured out how to solve yet. Because the Vitales put a price on your head. $500,000 for Marco's widow, alive or dead. Every piece of shit in the city is looking for you right now. Elena's stomach dropped. That's not... I didn't do anything. I'm not... You're a symbol, Dante interrupted. Marco's last possession. Taking you would be a message. So no, you don't get to leave. You get to stay here where I can keep you breathing, whether you like it or not. This isn't protection. This is imprisonment. Call it whatever helps you sleep at night. Dante pushed off the wall. Get dressed. You're coming with me. Where? Does it matter? It's not here. Elena looked down at herself. She'd been wearing the same clothes for days, hadn't showered since yesterday, probably looked as broken as she felt. I'm not going anywhere with you. That wasn't a request. I don't care. Elena stood her ground, even though her legs were shaking. You don't get to lock me up like an animal and then expect me to just follow orders. I'm not one of your soldiers. Something flickered in Dante's expression. Not quite respect, but maybe recognition that she had a spine after all. No, you're not. You're the widow of a man who died because he got soft. And if you want to survive what's coming, you'll do exactly what I tell you. Or what? Or I'll carry you out of here over my shoulder and you can deal with the humiliation. He said it so matter-of-factly that Elena believed him completely. Your choice. Walk or be carried. Elena wanted to fight, wanted to tell him where he could shove his orders. But 3 days of isolation had worn her down more than she wanted to admit, and the thought of leaving this room, even with him, was enough to make her swallow her pride. Fine, she said, but I need to change first. You have 5 minutes. Dante stepped out into the hallway, leaving the door open just enough that she knew he was right there, waiting. Elena grabbed clean clothes from the closet someone had stocked and changed quickly, her hands fumbling with buttons and zippers. She caught sight of herself in the mirror and almost didn't recognize the woman looking back, hollow-eyed, pale, her hair hanging limp around her face. She looked haunted. When she emerged, Dante was on his phone, speaking in rapid Italian to someone who was clearly arguing with him. He ended the call abruptly when he saw her. Let's go. He led her through corridors she'd never seen, down stairs that seemed to go on forever, through doors that required codes and key cards. The estate was massive. Elena had known that intellectually, but actually walking through it was different. Every window showed manicured grounds stretching into rain and mist. Every room they passed was furnished like something from a magazine, all dark wood and leather and money. They didn't see many people. A few guards nodded to Dante as they passed. A woman in an apron carrying linens ducked into a room to avoid them. Everyone seemed to know to give Dante space. Eventually they reached a wing that felt different, more utilitarian, less polished. Dante stopped at a heavy metal door and pulled out yet another key. What is this? Elena asked. Command center, where we actually work. He opened the door. Don't touch anything. Don't talk unless I ask you a question. And for the love of, just try not to make this harder than it needs to be. The room beyond was all business, banks of monitors showing security feeds, several men hunched over computers, a massive table covered in maps and photographs. It smelled like coffee and cigarettes and the particular tension of people under pressure. Every head turned when Dante walked in with Elena. Is that her? One of the men asked, his eyes moving over Elena with undisguised curiosity. This is Marco's widow, Dante said, his voice carrying a warning. She's under my protection. Anyone who looks at her wrong answers to me. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The man who'd spoken looked away quickly. Dante guided Elena to a chair in the corner. Sit. Stay quiet. She sat, her hands folded in her lap, trying to make herself invisible while Dante moved to the center table. The men gathered around him, their voices low and urgent. The Vitales hit 3 more of our operations last night, someone was saying, pointing to locations on a map. Took out the warehouse on 5th, burned the club on Hamilton, shot up the restaurant front on Park. Casualties? Dante's voice was flat. 7 dead, dozen injured. They're moving fast, another man added, trying to take advantage while we're regrouping. Dante studied the map, his fingers tracing patterns Elena couldn't decipher. What about our response? Angelo wants to hit them back hard, full assault on their main territory. Angelo's an idiot who thinks with his trigger finger. Dante's jaw tightened. We hit back smart, not hard. I want intel on their movements, their supply lines, their weak points. We make them bleed slowly. That's not how Marco would have. Marco's dead. Dante cut him off, and the room went silent. I'm in charge now. We do this my way. Elena watched him from her corner, saw the way the other men straightened up, the way they nodded, even though some of them clearly disagreed. Dante commanded respect through sheer force of will, no charm required. He was nothing like Marco had been. Marco who'd smiled and joked and made people want to follow him. Dante just made them too afraid not to. The meeting continued for what felt like hours. Elena learned more about the organization in those hours than she'd known in all her brief time as Marco's fiancée. The DeLucas ran everything: drugs, gambling, protection rackets, legitimate businesses used to wash dirty money. They had politicians in their pocket, cops on their payroll, judges who owed them favors. It was a machine, vast and intricate, and Marco's death had thrown it into chaos. Dante was trying to hold it together through sheer, stubborn refusal to let it fall apart. What about the funeral? Someone asked. Dante's expression shuddered. Day after tomorrow. Private. Family only. People will expect, I don't care what people expect. Marco gets buried with dignity, not turned into a spectacle for every vulture in the city to gawk at. The man nodded and made a note. Next, Dante said, moving on like the topic of his brother's funeral wasn't carving him hollow. Elena found herself studying his profile. The hard line of his jaw, the scar cutting through his eyebrow, the way his shoulders never quite relaxed even when he was standing still. He looked like someone perpetually braced for the next attack, like he'd learned a long time ago that safety was an illusion. He also looked like he hadn't slept in days. The meeting finally broke up around midnight. The men filtered out until it was just Dante and Elena and one older man with gray hair and tired eyes. "You need to rest," the older man said to Dante. "You're no good to anyone if you collapse." "I'm fine, Vincent." "You're not fine. You haven't been fine since—" Vincent glanced at Elena, then back to Dante. "Just get some sleep. A few hours. The war will still be here in the morning." Dante rubbed his eyes, a gesture so weary it made him look almost human. "Yeah, okay." Vincent nodded and left, and then it was just the two of them in the command center, surrounded by maps of violence and photographs of dead men. "Why did you bring me here?" Elena asked, breaking the silence. Dante looked at her like he'd forgotten she was there. "What?" "You could have left me in that room. Why bring me to this meeting? Why let me see all of this?" He considered the question, his expression unreadable. "Because I'm tired of you being a ghost in this house. Because you need to understand what you're part of now. Because—" He stopped, seemed to reconsider. "Doesn't matter. Come on." He led her back through the maze of corridors, but this time he didn't take her to her room. Instead, they ended up in a different wing, stopping at a door that opened into what was clearly his personal space, a bedroom that was Spartan compared to the rest of the house. No decoration, no personal touches. Just a bed, a desk covered in files, weapons mounted on the wall. "Why are we here?" Elena asked. Dante went to the desk and pulled out a folder. He handed it to her without explanation. Elena opened it and felt her breath catch. Inside were photographs of her family, her mother, her father, her younger sister Maria. Recent photographs, taken in the last few days. Her mother leaving the grocery store, her father at work, Maria walking to school. "Why do you have these?" Elena whispered. "Because I need to know who might use them against you. Against us." Dante leaned against the desk. "Your family's been trying to contact you. Your father's called my people 6 times. Your sister shows up at the gates every morning asking to see you." Elena's throat tightened. "Maria's here? At the estate?" "Was here. We send her away. She keeps coming back." The image of her sister, barely 17, still in high school, standing at the gates of this fortress begging to see her made Elena's chest hurt. "I need to talk to her, just for a minute, just to tell her I'm okay." "No." "She's worried. She's probably terrified." "She should be terrified," Dante interrupted. "She should understand that her family sold you, and there are consequences for that. Let her sit with it. She didn't do anything wrong. She's just a kid. She's old enough to understand that choices matter." Dante took the folder back. "And your family made their choice when they traded you for their debts." Elena wanted to argue, but the photographs had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. Seeing her family going about their lives while she was trapped here felt surreal, like looking at a world she used to belong to through glass. "Do they know Marco's dead?" she asked quietly. "Yeah. Made the news. Tragic accident at a private event. No details released to the public." Dante's mouth twisted. "The official story is that there was a gas leak, explosion, several casualties. Very sad. Very tragic. No mention of bullets or blood or warfare." "And people believe that?" "People believe what they're told to believe. It's easier than facing the truth." Elena sank into the chair by his desk, exhausted suddenly. "I don't know how to do this, how to exist in this world. Marco was supposed to. He was supposed to teach me, I guess. Show me how things worked. Marco was going to keep you locked in a pretty cage and tell you everything was fine," Dante said bluntly. "He wanted a wife who didn't ask questions and didn't see too much. He wanted you innocent. And what do you want?" The question hung in the air between them. Dante looked at her with those cold, assessing eyes, and Elena had the sudden feeling that he was seeing something she didn't want him to see. I want you to survive, he said finally, because if you die, it's one more thing Marco's death accomplished. One more victory for the people who killed him, and I'm not giving them that. It wasn't kindness, wasn't even really about her, but it was something. The funeral, Elena said. Can I go? No. He was my husband. For 3 hours, you barely knew him. Dante's voice was hard again. The funeral is for family, real family, people who earned the right to grieve. The words stung worse than Elena expected. So I'm not family. You're a complication. There's a difference. Elena stood up, anger finally burning through the exhaustion. You know what? I'm tired of your contempt. I'm tired of being treated like I'm the enemy when all I did was try to survive. You want to hate me? Fine. Hate me. But at least have the guts to tell me why. Dante stared at her, something dangerous flickering in his expression. For a second, Elena thought she'd pushed too far. Then he laughed, a short, sharp sound with no humor in it. You want to know why I hate you? He moved closer, and Elena forced herself not to step back. Because you represent everything weak about what Marco became. He was supposed to be smart, ruthless, but he got it in his head that he needed a normal life, a clean wife, something pure to balance out the dirt, and that weakness got him killed. That's not... You were a distraction, Dante continued, his voice low and intense. He was so focused on playing house with you that he missed the signs, missed the threat. And when the Vitalis came, he died trying to protect you instead of fighting back. Elena felt like she'd been slapped. You're blaming me for his death. I'm blaming him for choosing you over survival, but yeah, you're part of that equation. I didn't ask him to protect me. I didn't ask for any of this, but you took it anyway, Dante cut her off. Took the ring, took the name, took the protection. And now Marco's dead and you're still here, living in his house, eating his food, existing under his protection, even though he's gone. So yeah, I look at you and I see every bad decision he made, every moment of weakness that led to him bleeding out on that floor. The silence that followed was crushing. Elena couldn't breathe past the weight of his words, past the realization that to Dante, she wasn't a person. She was a symbol of his brother's failure. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I'm sorry he died. I'm sorry you lost your brother. I'm sorry I'm not strong enough or hard enough or whatever you think I should be. But I'm here, and I'm trying, and I don't know what else you want from me. Dante's expression shifted, something that might have been regret flickering across his face before he shuddered it. I want you to stop being a victim. Stop crying about how unfair this is, and figure out how to be useful. Useful how? I don't know yet. He turned away, running a hand through his hair. That's the problem. Elena wiped her eyes angrily. She refused to cry in front of him again. Then maybe you should figure it out before you drag me to more meetings, or lock me in rooms, or make me feel like existing is a burden. It is a burden, Dante said, but there was less venom in it now. But it's one I'm stuck with, so we both have to deal. Great. How reassuring. I'm not here to reassure you. What are you here for then? Dante turned back to look at her, and something in his expression made Elena's breath catch. There was exhaustion there, yes, and anger, but underneath it, buried so deep she almost missed it, was pain. I'm here to make sure my brother didn't die for nothing, he said quietly. And right now, you're the only thing left of what he was trying to build. So like it or not, we're connected, and I need you to not fall apart. It was the most honest thing he'd said to her, the most human. Elena nodded slowly. Okay. I'll try to not fall apart, to be whatever you need me to be. She met his eyes. But you have to stop treating me like I'm the enemy. If we're stuck together, we have to find a way to coexist that doesn't involve you hating me and me being terrified of you. Dante considered this. I don't hate you. You do a really good impression of it. His mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Fair enough. And I'm not terrified of you, Elena added, which was a lie, and they both knew it. Also fair. The tension in the room had shifted somehow. Not gone, but different, less sharp. The funeral, Elena said again. I won't go if you really don't want me there, but I'd like to say goodbye, even if I barely knew him. Dante was quiet for a long moment. Then, reluctantly, "You can come, but you stay in the back. You don't speak. And if anyone asks, you're there as a courtesy, nothing more." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I'm doing this for him, not you." But he was doing it, and that mattered. "It's late," Dante said, glancing at the clock. It was past 2 in the morning. "You should sleep." "Where?" "Your room. Where else?" "Will you lock the door again?" Dante looked at her, and something complicated crossed his face. "No, but don't test it. Don't try to leave the estate or contact anyone or do anything stupid. Just stay put." Elena nodded. It was more freedom than she'd had in days. Dante walked her back to her suite, neither of them speaking. When they reached her door, Elena paused. "Can I ask you something?" "Depends on the question." "The scar on your face, how did you get it?" Dante's hand went unconsciously to his cheek, tracing the old damage. "Someone tried to kill me when I was younger. They almost succeeded." "Who?" "Doesn't matter. They're dead now." He said it so simply, like it was just a fact of life. "Get some sleep, Elena." He left before she could ask anything else. Elena went inside and closed the door, listening for the lock. It didn't click. True to his word, Dante had left it open. It was a small thing, a tiny gesture of trust, or maybe just exhaustion, but it felt monumental. Elena lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. The funeral was in 2 days. She'd see Marco laid to rest, say goodbye to a man she'd married but never really known. And then what? What came after the funeral, after the formal mourning period ended? What came after depended entirely on Dante, she realized, on what he decided she was worth, on whether he could see past his anger and pain long enough to let her become something other than a reminder of his brother's death. She thought about what he'd said, that Marco had died protecting her instead of fighting back. The guilt of that threatened to swallow her whole. If she hadn't been there, would Marco still be alive? Would those extra seconds spent pushing her to safety have been the difference between life and death? Elena would never know, but she had to live with the possibility. She finally fell asleep as dawn was breaking and dreamed of blood and bullets and a man with cold eyes who looked at her like she was simultaneously the problem and the solution. When she woke, it was afternoon and someone had left food outside her door. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing, then showered and dressed in clothes that still felt like they belonged to someone else. She spent the day exploring her unlocked suite more thoroughly, found books in the closet, a laptop that was password protected, more clothes than she could ever wear, everything she might need except freedom. That evening, Dante came by again. He looked marginally less exhausted, which probably meant he'd slept at least a few hours. "Tomorrow," he said without preamble. "The funeral. Be ready at 9. "I will be." He started to leave, then paused. "There's something you should know. About the funeral. About who'll be there." "Okay." "Marco had a daughter. From before. Before you." Elena's stomach dropped. "What?" "Her name's Sophia. She's 6. Her mother died 3 years ago, so Marco was raising her." Dante's expression was carefully neutral. "She'll be at the funeral, and she's going to have questions about who you are." "Oh, God," Elena breathed. Marco had a daughter, a child who'd just lost her father. "Does she know about me?" "She knows Marco got married. She doesn't know you yet." Dante's jaw tightened. "She's a good kid, smart. She doesn't deserve any of this." "No," Elena agreed softly. "She doesn't. I'm telling you because she might approach you, and I need you to be kind to her. Whatever you think of this situation, whatever anger you have about being here, she's innocent. She's just a kid who lost her dad." Elena felt something crack in her chest. "I would never, Dante, I would never take anything out on a child." He studied her face, searching for something. "Good, because she's all that's left of Marco that's worth protecting." The words hung heavy in the air. All that's left worth protecting. Not Elena. Not the widow or the empire or the legacy. Just a 6-year-old girl who'd lost everything. "I'll be kind," Elena promised. "I'll do whatever she needs." Dante nodded once and left. Elena sat down heavily on the bed, her mind reeling. Marco had a daughter, a little girl who was about to bury her father. And somehow, Elena was supposed to navigate meeting her, being kind to her, existing in her space without making everything worse. She thought about her own sister, about Maria showing up at the gates day after day trying to see her, about family and loss and the ways people failed each other. And she wondered if maybe Dante was right, if maybe she needed to stop being a victim and figure out how to be useful. Because if she couldn't save herself, maybe she could at least try not to hurt the other people caught in this nightmare. Tomorrow would be the funeral. Tomorrow she'd say goodbye to a man she barely knew and meet his daughter and try to hold herself together in front of an entire organization that probably blamed her for his death. Tomorrow, the real test would begin. Elena just hoped she was strong enough to pass it. The dress someone had left for the funeral was black and simple, the kind of thing that screamed widow without trying too hard. Elena stood in front of the mirror staring at herself, at this woman in mourning clothes who felt like a stranger. Her hands shook as she tried to clasp the necklace, a single pearl on a thin gold chain that had been Marco's engagement gift to her. She'd worn it on their wedding day. Now she'd wear it to his burial. The knock on her door came at exactly 9. Elena took one last breath and opened it to find Dante waiting, dressed in a black suit that made him look even more severe than usual. His eyes moved over her briefly, clinical and detached. "Ready?" he asked. "No." "Good. Honesty." He turned and started walking. "Come on." They rode to the cemetery in silence, separated by the width of the town car's back seat. Elena watched the city slide past the tinted windows and tried not to think about the last time she'd been in a car like this. Riding to her wedding, her mother crying beside her, her father staring straight ahead like he couldn't bear to look at what he'd done. The cemetery was private, enclosed by high walls and iron gates. Security was everywhere, men in dark suits with earpieces, scanning the perimeter, watching the road. This wasn't just a funeral, it was a potential target. "Stay close," Dante said as they pulled up to where a small group had already gathered. "Don't wander, don't talk to anyone I haven't cleared." Elena nodded, her throat too tight for words. The gathering was smaller than she'd expected. Maybe 30 people, all dressed in black, all looking like they belonged to the same shadowy world Marco had ruled. She recognized a few faces from the command center, but most were strangers. Then she saw the little girl. Sophia stood beside an older woman who had to be her grandmother or nanny, a tiny figure in a black dress that was too formal for a 6-year-old. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat braid, and she clutched a stuffed rabbit against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Elena's heart broke on sight. Dante's hand touched her elbow, guiding her toward the chairs set up facing the grave. "That's her," he said quietly, unnecessarily. They took seats in the second row. The older woman and Sophia sat in front, and Elena could see the little girl's shoulders shaking with silent tears. She wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but she didn't have the right. She was nothing to this child, just the woman who'd married her father for a few hours before he died. The service started. A priest spoke words that Elena didn't really hear, something about eternal rest and mercy and loss. She stared at the casket, polished mahogany, covered in white roses, and tried to connect it to the man who danced with her at their reception, who'd promised her protection, who died in her arms before either of them had a chance to figure out what their marriage might become. Someone was speaking now. Vincent, the older man from the command center. He talked about Marco's leadership, his vision, his strength, made him sound like a hero instead of a man who'd run a criminal empire. But maybe to these people, he was a hero. Maybe in this world, the lines were different. Elena glanced at Dante. His face was stone, no emotion showing, but his hands were clenched so tight on his knees that his knuckles were white. She had the sudden strange urge to reach over and cover one of those hands with hers, to offer some kind of comfort. But she knew he'd pull away, knew he didn't want anything from her, especially not sympathy. The priest finished. People began to stand, moving forward to place flowers on the casket or pay their respects. Elena stayed seated, uncertain, until Dante stood and offered his hand. "Come on," he said. "You need to be seen doing this." She took his hand, the first time she'd willingly touched him, and let him lead her to the grave. Up close, the casket looked smaller than it should. Elena placed her hand on the polished wood and tried to think of something to say, some goodbye that mattered. "I'm sorry," she whispered finally. "I'm sorry it ended this way." Dante's hand was still on her elbow, steady and surprisingly gentle. He didn't rush her, just waited until she stepped back, then guided her away from the grave. They were almost back to their seats when the little girl moved. Sophia slipped away from her grandmother and ran straight to Dante, wrapping her small arms around his waist and burying her face in his jacket. Dante's entire demeanor changed, the hardness melting into something softer as he crouched down to her level. "Hey, Principessa," he said quietly, and his voice was nothing like the cold tone he used with everyone else. "You okay?" Sophia shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I want Papa back." I know you do." Dante pulled her close, and Elena saw his jaw clench with the effort of holding himself together. "But he can't come back, baby. So we have to be strong for him, okay? We have to be brave." "I don't want to be brave," Sophia sobbed. "I want my Papa." Elena felt tears burning in her own eyes. She looked away, giving them privacy, but she could still hear Sophia crying, still hear Dante murmuring comfort, in a voice so different from the one he used with her that it felt like watching a different person entirely. After a moment, Sophia pulled back and looked up at Dante with huge, wet brown eyes. "Who's that?" she asked, pointing at Elena. Elena froze. Dante glanced back at her, something unreadable crossing his face. "That's Elena," he said carefully. She was your Papa's friend." "Friend, not wife, not widow, just friend." Sophia studied Elena with the brutal honesty only children had. "Were you at the party? The one where Papa got hurt?" Elena's throat closed. She managed a nod. "Did it hurt? When he died?" The question hit like a physical blow. Elena dropped to her knees without thinking, bringing herself to Sophia's eye level. "Yes," she said, because lying to this child seemed worse than anything. "It hurt him, but it was fast. He didn't suffer long." Sophia's chin trembled. "Did he say anything? About me?" Elena wanted to lie, wanted to give this little girl some comfort, some final message from her father. But she couldn't. "No, sweetheart. He didn't have time to say much of anything, but I know he loved you very much." Anyone could see that. "How do you know if you were just his friend?" "Smart kid. Too smart." "Because," Elena said slowly, "people who love their children talk about them all the time. And your Papa talked about you. He told me you were brave and smart and the best thing in his whole life." It was partly true. Marco had mentioned his daughter once, briefly, during one of their awkward pre-wedding dinners. He'd smiled when he talked about her, the only real smile Elena had seen from him. Sophia wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Uncle Dante says I have to live with Nonna now, at her house." "That's probably for the best," Elena said gently, even as her heart ached. "Your Nonna loves you. She'll take good care of you. But I want to stay at Papa's house, with Uncle Dante." Sophia looked up at Dante with such desperate hope that Elena saw him flinch. "Can I, Uncle Dante? Please?" Dante's expression was pained. "Sophia, we talked about this. The estate isn't safe right now. You're better off with Nonna until things settle down." "But I don't want to go. I want to stay with you." "I know, Principessa, but sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do to stay safe." Dante pulled her close again. "I promise I'll visit. Every week. And as soon as it's safe, you can come back, okay?" Sophia nodded against his chest, but she was crying again, and Elena had to look away before she started crying too. The grandmother, Nonna, approached, her face lined with grief and exhaustion. "Come, Sophia," she said gently. It's time to go." "I don't want to leave Uncle Dante." "I know, Cara, but we must." Dante kissed the top of Sophia's head and then carefully extracted himself from her grip. "Be good for Nonna, and remember what I told you about being brave." Sophia nodded miserably and let her grandmother lead her away. She looked back once, her small face crumpled with sorrow, and Elena felt something fundamental shift in her chest. This was what Dante had been protecting, not the empire or the legacy or even his own grief, just this little girl who'd lost her father and didn't understand why the world had to be so cruel. The funeral broke up after that. People dispersed quickly, probably aware that lingering made them targets. Elena and Dante stayed until the grave was filled, until the dirt covered the casket and the flowers were arranged on top. "She's going to be okay," Elena said quietly. Sophia, she's strong. She's 6, Dante said. She shouldn't have to be strong. No, she shouldn't. They stood there in silence, looking at the fresh grave, until Dante finally turned away. Let's go. The ride back to the estate was as silent as the ride there. But something had changed between them. Elena couldn't name it exactly, but the hostility felt less sharp, like seeing him with Sophia had reminded her that he was human underneath all the armor. When they arrived back at the house, Dante didn't immediately dismiss her. Instead, he led her to his office, a room she hadn't seen before, all dark wood and leather and the smell of expensive whiskey. Sit, he said, pouring himself a drink. Elena sat, watching as he downed the whiskey in one gulp and poured another. His hands were steady, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he held himself like he might shatter if he relaxed even slightly. Thank you, he said finally, for what you said to Sophia about Marco. I meant it, what I could mean anyway. I know. Dante leaned against his desk, looking at her with those analytical eyes. She liked you. I'm glad. That's a problem. Elena frowned. How is that a problem? Because she's going to ask about you. Wonder why you're here, and eventually someone's going to tell her you were married to her father. Dante's jaw tightened. She's going to see you as some kind of replacement for her mother, and that's not fair to either of you. I would never try to replace her mother. You wouldn't have to try. You're here. You were Marco's wife. That's enough. He drank again. But we can't avoid it. She'll find out eventually. So we need to figure out how to handle it. What do you want me to do? I don't know yet. Dante set down his glass with more force than necessary. I don't know what to do with you at all. The admission seemed to cost him. Elena could see it in the way his shoulders slumped slightly and the exhaustion that finally showed through his armor. You could let me leave, she offered quietly. I told you, there's a price on your head. So hire guards, send me somewhere safe, somewhere far away from here. There is nowhere safe, Dante said flatly. Not for you, not anymore. The second you married Marco, you became part of this, and there's no unmarrying a dead man. Elena had known that intellectually, but hearing it said out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. She was trapped in this life, permanently. So what then? She asked, her voice sharper than intended. I just exist here forever? A prisoner in a dead man's house? You're not a prisoner. Really? Because I can't leave, can't contact anyone, can't make any decisions about my own life? What would you call that? Dante's eyes flashed. I'd call it staying alive, which is more than a lot of people in your position can say. My position? Elena repeated. You mean as the inconvenient widow? I mean as a woman with no protection except what I give you, no power except what I allow you, no future except what I decide. Dante pushed off the desk. You want honesty? Fine. Here's honesty. Your leverage. You're a symbol. You're a potential weakness that our enemies will try to exploit. And the only reason you're still breathing is because I'm choosing to keep you that way. The words should have terrified her, should have sent her running or crying or both. Instead, they made her angry. Then stop choosing, Elena said, standing up to face him. If I'm such a burden, if keeping me alive is so difficult, then just stop. Let me take my chances out there. At least then I'd have some control over my own fate. You have no idea what you're saying. Don't I? I've been traded, married, widowed, and imprisoned in the span of a week. I think I have a pretty good idea of how little control I have. Elena's hands were shaking, but she didn't care. You want me to stop being a victim? Fine. Then stop treating me like one. Give me something to do. Some way to be useful instead of just existing in this limbo. Dante stared at her, and she could practically see him recalculating. What did you do? Before all this? I was a nurse at a free clinic downtown. A nurse. Something shifted in his expression. You have medical training. 3 years of nursing school and 2 years in the field. Why? Dante was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then, come with me. He led her down to the basement, through more locked doors and security checkpoints, until they reached what looked like a medical facility. sterile white walls, examination tables, cabinets full of supplies. It was better equipped than the clinic where Elena had worked. "We keep this for emergencies," Dante explained. "When going to a hospital would raise questions. Usually we have a doctor on call, but he's been unreliable lately." "You want me to work here?" Elena realized. "I want you to be useful. You said you wanted purpose. Well, here it is." Dante gestured to the room. "Our people get hurt. A lot. Most of it we can't take to real hospitals. If you can patch them up, keep them alive until the doctor can get here, that's worth something." It wasn't freedom. It wasn't even close. But it was something other than sitting in her room waiting for the next crisis. "I'll need supplies," Elena said, already mentally cataloging what she saw. "Real supplies, not just the basics, and I'll need to know what I'm dealing with. Gunshot wounds, stab wounds, what?" "All of the above." Dante watched her examine the space. "Can you handle it?" Elena thought about the clinic, about the overdoses and gang violence and domestic abuse cases she'd treated with minimal equipment and even less support. "Yeah, I can handle it." "Good." Dante moved toward the door. "I'll have Vincent bring you up to speed on protocols, and Elena?" She turned. "Thank you for what you said to Sophia, and for this." He gestured to the medical bay. "For trying." It was the closest thing to kindness he'd shown her. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. After he left, she spent an hour cataloging supplies and making lists of what she'd need. It felt good to have something to focus on, something concrete and practical, instead of just spiraling in her own head. Vincent showed up around sunset with a clipboard and a tired smile. "Heard you're our new medic." "Apparently." "Can't say I'm not relieved. The old doc drinks too much and his hands shake." Vincent handed her the clipboard. "These are protocols for treatment, who to call in different situations, that kind of thing. Most of it's common sense." Elena scanned the pages. It was surreal, reading instructions for treating gunshot wounds like they were routine procedures. But in this world, they probably were. "How often will I be needed?" she asked. "Depends. Could be every day, could be once a month. Right now, with the war heating up, probably more often than not." Vincent's expression turned serious. "You should know, the men might not take kindly to being treated by Marco's widow. Some of them blame you for what happened." Dante already made that clear. "I'm sure he did. But I'm telling you anyway because when a man's bleeding and scared, he doesn't always think straight. They might say things, might refuse your help." Vincent met her eyes. "Don't take it personal, and don't let it stop you from doing your job." "I won't." "Good." He started to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I think this is good. You being here, being useful. Dante needs people he can trust, and right now that list is pretty damn short. He doesn't trust me. Not yet, but he's letting you try. That's more than he gives most people." Vincent smiled slightly. "Give it time. Dante's hard, but he's not unreasonable. You prove yourself, he'll see it." After Vincent left, Elena stayed in the medical bay, organizing supplies and trying to quiet the voice in her head that said this was insane. She was setting up to treat criminals, to patch up the very people who'd probably helped orchestrate the violence that killed Marco. But what choice did she have? She could sit in her room and be useless, or she could do this. At least this way she was saving lives instead of just existing. Her first patient came 3 hours later. A young guy, maybe 25, with a knife wound in his side and panic in his eyes. 2 others half carried him into the medical bay, shouting for help. Elena's training kicked in immediately. "Get him on the table, now." They obeyed, and she was already pulling on gloves, assessing the damage. Deep, but not fatal if she worked fast. "What's your name?" she asked the wounded man. "Tony," he gasped. "Okay, Tony, I'm going to fix this, but it's going to hurt. Can you handle that?" He nodded, teeth gritted. Elena worked quickly, cleaning the wound, checking for internal damage, stitching him up with steady hands while he cursed and groaned. His friends watched from the corner, their expressions shifting from suspicion to grudging respect as she worked. "You're Marco's girl," one of them said. Not a question. "I'm the person keeping your friend alive," Elena replied without looking up. "That's all that matters right now." The wound was worse than it looked initially. She had to go deeper, had to make sure nothing vital was nicked. Tony passed out halfway through, which made it easier. When she was finally done, she stepped back and stripped off her bloody gloves. He'll live. Keep the wound clean, change the dressing twice a day, and watch for infection. If he spikes a fever, call me immediately. The friends nodded, still looking uncertain. You can take him upstairs to rest, Elena continued, but someone needs to stay with him tonight. Make sure he doesn't move around too much and tear the stitches. We'll watch him, one of them said. Then, grudgingly, thanks. They carried Tony out, and Elena was left alone with bloody instruments and the shaking realization that she'd just crossed a line. She'd treated a criminal, probably helped him get back out there to commit more crimes, hurt more people. But he was also just a kid, scared and bleeding. And she'd taken an oath to help people, regardless of who they were. Dante appeared in the doorway as she was cleaning up. Heard you had your first patient. Word travels fast. Always does. He watched her work. How'd it go? He'll live, assuming he doesn't do anything stupid to reopen the wound. Good. Dante was quiet for a moment. The men are talking, saying you were calm, professional, that you knew what you were doing. I did 3 years of this. I should know what I'm doing. Still, it matters. Them seeing you as competent instead of just Marco's widow. Dante's expression was unreadable. You did good. The compliment, small as it was, meant more than Elena wanted to admit. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This was one patient, one relatively simple injury. It's going to get worse. I know. And they're still going to resist you, still going to question whether you're trustworthy. I know that too. Dante studied her, and Elena had the feeling he was seeing her differently than before. Not by much, but enough to matter. Get some rest. We'll need you sharp. He left, and Elena finished cleaning up. Her hands were steady, her mind clearer than it had been in days. She'd found purpose, something to hold on to in the chaos. It wasn't freedom, it wasn't safety, but it was hers. Over the next 3 days, Elena treated 6 more patients. Gunshot wounds, broken bones, one concussion that required careful monitoring. She worked without questioning where the injuries came from or what the patients had been doing when they got hurt. She just fixed what was broken and sent them on their way. The men slowly started to accept her, not warmly, but with grudging acknowledgement that she was useful, that she could be trusted to keep them alive. Dante watched from a distance, never interfering but always aware. Elena could feel his eyes on her sometimes when she worked, could sense him evaluating her every move. On the 4th day, he came to the medical bay while she was restocking supplies. We have a problem, he said without preamble. Elena turned. What kind of problem? The kind where I need your help. Dante's expression was grim. And you're not going to like it. Elena's hand stilled on the supply cabinet. Something in Dante's voice made her stomach tighten. What is it? There's someone I need you to see. Someone who needs medical attention but can't go to a hospital. Dante's jaw was tight. And before you agree, you should know. It's complicated. Everything here is complicated. Not like this. He gestured for her to follow. Come on, I'll explain on the way. They walked through the estate, past guards who nodded at Dante and ignored Elena completely. She'd gotten used to that, being invisible to everyone except when they needed her skills. We hit one of the Vitale operations last night, Dante said as they descended another set of stairs. Took out their main distribution center. Should set them back months. Good for you, Elena said flatly. During the raid, we found someone. A woman. Dante's expression darkened. She was being held there, against her will. Elena's breath caught. What do you mean held? I mean locked in a room, beaten, terrified. The Vitales were using her for leverage against her family. They reached a heavy door. Dante paused with his hand on the handle. Her name is Gabriella Russo. Her father runs a construction company that does business with both our family and the Vitales. They took her to force him to choose sides. Elena couldn't find words horrible enough. That's the life, Dante finished grimly. The woman's been through hell. She's hurt, traumatized, and she won't let any of my men near her. Vincent tried. She screamed until she passed out. So you want me to try because I'm a woman. I want you to try because you're a nurse who understands trauma, and because she needs help whether she trusts us or not. Dante opened the door. Just be gentle. She's been through enough. The room beyond was small and simply furnished. A bed, a chair, a bathroom door standing open. And on the bed, curled into a ball with her back against the wall, was a woman who looked like she'd been shattered and barely put back together. Gabriella Russo was maybe 30, with dark hair that hung in tangles around a face marked by bruises. Her lip was split, one eye swollen nearly shut, and she held herself with the rigid tension of someone expecting the next blow. When she saw Dante, she flinched violently. "It's okay," Elena said quickly, stepping in front of him. "I'm not here to hurt you. My name is Elena. I'm a nurse." Gabriella's eyes, one brown, one too swollen to see, fixed on Elena with desperate suspicion. "Where am I?" "You're safe. That's all that matters right now." Elena moved slowly into the room, hands visible, making no sudden movements. "Can I come closer? I'd like to check your injuries." "Don't touch me." Gabriella's voice was hoarse, like she'd been screaming. "Don't. I can't. I won't touch you unless you say it's okay," Elena promised. She pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down, keeping distance between them. "But I need to know if you're hurt, if anything's broken or bleeding. Everything hurts." "I know, I can help with that, but only if you let me." Behind her, Elena heard Dante shift. She turned and gave him a look that clearly said leave. To her surprise, he did, closing the door quietly behind him. Elena turned back to Gabriella. "He's gone. It's just us now." Some of the tension in Gabriella's shoulders eased. "Who are you, really?" "I told you, I'm a nurse. I work for the DeLuca family." Elena kept her voice calm, even. "I know you're scared. I know you don't know if you can trust anyone. But I promise you, I'm just here to help, not to hurt you." "They killed people," Gabriella whispered. "Last night. There was shooting and screaming and—" Her voice broke. "They killed people to get me out." "I know." Elena didn't try to sugarcoat it. "This world is violent, but you're out now, you're alive, and I want to make sure you stay that way." Gabriella was quiet for a long moment, studying Elena with her one good eye. "You're Marco DeLuca's wife. I saw your wedding announcement in the paper." Elena's chest tightened. "I was. He's dead now." "I heard about that too." Something shifted in Gabriella's expression. Recognition, maybe, or sympathy. "So you're trapped here too." The words hit harder than they should have. "I'm here," Elena said carefully. "Whether it's a trap or not depends on how you look at it." "How do you look at it?" "I'm still figuring that out." Elena leaned forward slightly. "But right now, I'm looking at a woman who needs medical attention. Will you let me help you?" Gabriella's hands were shaking. After what felt like an eternity, she nodded. Elena spent the next hour carefully examining Gabriella's injuries. Bruised ribs, possibly cracked, the split lip, the black eye. Cuts and abrasions all over her arms and legs. Nothing life-threatening, but everything painful and every mark a testament to what she'd endured. "How long were they holding you?" Elena asked as she cleaned a particularly nasty cut on Gabriella's forearm. 2 weeks, maybe 3. I lost track of days. Gabriella's voice was hollow. "They said they'd kill my father if he didn't give them the construction contracts. Said they'd send him pieces of me if he talked to the police." Elena's hands clenched on the antiseptic wipe. "I'm sorry. That should never have happened to you." "But it did. And now I'm here, and I don't know if this is better or worse." Gabriella looked at Elena with bruised, exhausted eyes. "Am I a prisoner here too?" "No," Elena said firmly. "Dante pulled you out because it was the right thing to do. Once you're well enough, you can go home." "Just like that?" "Just like that." Gabriella laughed, a broken sound. "You actually believe that? You think he's a good man?" Elena paused, choosing her words carefully. "I think he's a complicated man who does terrible things for reasons he thinks are justified. But I also think he wouldn't have risked his people to save you if he didn't have some kind of code." "A code?" Gabriella repeated. "Is that what we're calling it?" "I don't know what else to call it." Elena finished bandaging the cut and sat back. "You should rest. I'll bring you something for the pain. Don't leave." The words came out panicked. "Please, I can't be alone right now." Elena looked at this woman who'd been through hell and saw herself reflected back. Different circumstances, different trauma, but the same fundamental fear. The same desperate need for human connection in the darkness. Okay, Elena said softly. I'll stay. She pulled the chair closer and sat while Gabriella slowly relaxed, exhaustion finally overcoming fear. Within minutes, she was asleep, her breathing evening out despite the pain that had to be radiating through her battered body. Elena sat in the quiet room and thought about codes and justifications and the ways people convinced themselves they were doing the right thing while committing atrocities. Dante had saved Gabriella. That was good. But he'd probably killed people doing it. Did one cancel out the other? Or did they exist separately, two truths that couldn't be reconciled? The door opened quietly. Dante stood in the doorway, his expression questioning. Elena stood and moved into the hallway, closing the door gently behind her so they wouldn't wake Gabriella. How is she? Dante asked. Hurt, terrified, but she'll heal. Elena crossed her arms. Physically, anyway. The rest is going to take longer. Can she travel? Not immediately. She needs rest, probably a few days before she's strong enough to go anywhere. Elena studied his face. You're really going to let her go home? Why wouldn't I? Because she saw things, knows things, could be a liability. Dante's expression hardened. I'm not the Vitalis. I don't keep women locked up and terrorized to get what I want. No, you just start wars and get people killed. I do what's necessary to survive. He stepped closer, and Elena refused to back down. But there's a difference between eliminating threats and torturing innocent people for leverage. If you can't see that, you haven't been paying attention. I've been paying plenty of attention, Elena shot back. I've been patching up your soldiers, cleaning their blood off my hands, listening to them talk about the people they've hurt. Don't lecture me about the difference between necessary and cruel when I'm the one dealing with the consequences. Then why are you still here? Dante's voice was quiet, but intense. Why haven't you demanded to leave? Why agree to help at all? Elena opened her mouth to answer and found she didn't have one. Or rather, she had too many answers, and none of them felt complete. Because, she said finally, I don't know where else I'd go. Because at least here I'm useful. Because, she stopped, frustrated. I don't know, Dante. Maybe I'm just trying to survive too. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite sympathy, but understanding. Fair enough. They stood in the hallway, the silence between them different than it had been before. Less hostile, more complicated. She called me trapped, Elena said quietly. Gabriella. She said I was trapped here too. What did you tell her? That I was still figuring it out. Elena met his eyes. Am I? Trapped? Dante was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, I don't know anymore. You were supposed to be, but you've made yourself necessary. And necessary people have more freedom than prisoners. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. He turned to leave, then paused. Thank you for helping her. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. That's what I do. Elena's voice was firm. I help people, regardless of who they are or what side they're on. Dante looked back at her, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. That's going to get you in trouble someday. Probably. But at least I'll be able to live with myself. He left without responding, and Elena went back into Gabriella's room to keep her vigil. Over the next 3 days, Elena split her time between treating the usual parade of injured soldiers and caring for Gabriella. The woman slowly started to trust her, started to talk about what had happened, started to heal in small, incremental ways. On the 3rd day, Gabriella was strong enough to sit up without wincing. I want to go home, she said. I need to see my father. Let him know I'm okay. I'll tell Dante, Elena promised. She found him in the command center, staring at maps and looking like he hadn't slept in days. When she told him about Gabriella's request, he nodded. I'll arrange transport. Tonight, after dark. Safer that way. Will you tell her father what happened? What you did? He already knows. I contacted him the night we brought her here. Dante's expression was unreadable. He's grateful, offered to triple his business with us, cut the Vitales out completely. So you did get something out of saving her. I got a man's loyalty and a woman out of captivity. If you're asking if I'd have done it without the business angle, the answer is yes. But I'm not stupid enough to turn down an advantage when it's offered. Elena wanted to argue, to point out the moral complexity of profiting from a rescue, but she was too tired and Dante looked too worn down for the fight to feel worth it. She wants to thank you, Elena said instead, before she goes. That's not necessary. I think it is. For her. Dante sighed, but nodded. Fine. Bring her to my office at 8. That evening, Elena helped Gabriella get ready. She'd found clean clothes that actually fit, helped her shower and wash her hair, covered the worst of the bruises with makeup. Gabriella looked almost normal if you didn't look too close. They walked to Dante's office together, Gabriella moving slowly but steadily. When they arrived, Dante was waiting, standing by the window with his back to the door. Mr. De Luca, Gabriella said, her voice stronger than it had been. I wanted to thank you for what you did. Dante turned. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. You saved my life. Gabriella's hands were clasped tight in front of her. I know your family isn't. She struggled for words. I know what people say about you. But what you did for me, risking your men to get me out, it was basic human decency, Dante interrupted. The Vitalis were animals for what they did to you. I just corrected the situation. It was more than that, Gabriella insisted, and I won't forget it. Neither will my father. Dante nodded once, clearly uncomfortable with the gratitude. Your father's waiting outside the gates. My men will escort you to him. Gabriella turned to Elena. Thank you, too, for everything, for being kind when you didn't have to be. Elena hugged her carefully, mindful of the healing ribs. Take care of yourself, and if you ever need anything, I know where to find you, Gabriella finished with a sad smile. Though I hope I never have to come back here. No offense. None taken. After Gabriella left with her escort, Elena and Dante stood in his office in silence. That was good, Elena said finally. What you did for her. Don't canonize me. I'm still the guy who started the raid that got 3 men killed. I know. But you're also the guy who pulled an innocent woman out of captivity instead of leaving her there. Elena met his eyes. People aren't one thing, Dante. We're all a mix of good and bad decisions. Some of us more bad than good. Maybe, but you made a good choice this time. Elena moved toward the door. That has to count for something. Does it? Dante's voice stopped her. Count for something with you? Elena turned back, surprised by the question. Why do you care what I think? I don't know. He sounded frustrated by his own answer. But apparently I do. The admission hung between them, heavy and unexpected. Elena didn't know what to say, didn't know how to navigate this shift in their dynamic. You're not what I expected, she said honestly. When Marco died and you locked me up, I thought you were just cruel. But you're not. You're, complicated, Dante finished. You said that before. Because it's true. Elena took a breath. You're cruel when you think you need to be. You're kind when you think no one's watching. You hate me for what I represent, but you respect what I can do. You're 100 contradictions and I don't know how to... She stopped, overwhelmed. How to what? How to exist around you without getting whiplash from trying to figure out who you actually are. Dante laughed, short and sharp. Good luck with that. I've been trying to figure it out for 30 years. How old are you? 32. Why? Just curious. Marco was 38. I didn't realize there was such a gap. 6 years. Enough that we grew up differently. He got the good version of our father. I got the version after the business hardened him. Dante's expression darkened. Marco was supposed to be better than me. Supposed to be the one who could make this family legitimate. And then he married you, and I thought... He stopped abruptly. You thought what? Elena pressed. I thought he was making the same mistakes our father made, trying to have both worlds, trying to be a family man and a crime boss, and thinking he could balance them. Dante's jaw tightened. It got our father killed, and it got Marco killed. So yeah, when I look at you, I see the choice that destroyed my brother. The word should have hurt, but Elena heard the pain underneath them, the grief Dante wouldn't let himself express any other way. I'm sorry, she said softly, that you lost them both, your father and your brother. That's not fair. Nothing's fair. Fair is a fairy tale we tell kids so they don't realize how cruel the world actually is. Dante turned back to the window. My father died when I was 17. Marco took over, tried to protect me, keep me out of the worst of it. But I didn't want protection. I wanted revenge. Did you get it? Yeah. I killed every person involved in my father's death. Took me 3 years, but I got them all. He said it flatly, like reciting facts. And it didn't change anything. He was still dead. I was still angry. The revenge didn't fix it. Revenge never does. I know that now. But Marco thought he could fix everything by going legitimate. By marrying someone clean, having a normal family, building something legal alongside the illegal. Dante's hands clenched. He thought you would save him, make him better. That's not fair to put on me. No, it's not. But he did it anyway. Dante finally turned to look at her. And then he died protecting you. So tell me, Elena, was it worth it? Did those 3 hours of marriage justify his death? The question was cruel, and Dante had to know it. Elena felt tears burn her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. No, she said clearly. Nothing justifies his death. Not me, not the marriage, not whatever future he thought we'd have. He died because evil people chose to kill him. Not because of me. Keep telling yourself that. I will. Because it's true. Elena's voice shook, but she held her ground. And you can hate me all you want for surviving when he didn't. You can blame me for every choice he made. But it won't bring him back. It won't change anything. It'll just make both of us miserable. Dante stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then something changed in his face, the armor cracking just slightly. I don't hate you, he said quietly. Could have fooled me. I hate what you represent. I hate that Marco died and you lived. I hate that I have to protect you when all I want to do is destroy everything connected to that night. His voice was raw now, honest in a way she'd never heard. But I don't hate you. I don't know what to do with you. Elena's heart was pounding. Join the club. I don't know what to do with you either. They stood there in the heavy silence, something shifting between them that neither could name. The hostility was still there, but underneath it was something more complicated. Recognition, maybe, or just exhaustion from carrying so much anger. It's late, Dante said finally. You should rest. So should you. You look terrible. Flattery will get you nowhere. Good thing I'm not trying to flatter you. Elena moved toward the door. Get some sleep, Dante. The war will still be here tomorrow. She left before he could respond, her hands shaking as she walked back to her suite. Something had shifted tonight. She didn't know if it was good or bad, didn't know if it changed anything fundamental, but the conversation had felt different, real in a way their previous interactions hadn't been. Elena lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, replaying Dante's words. I don't hate you. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd had before. The next morning, Elena was in the medical bay restocking supplies when Dante appeared in the doorway. We have a situation, he said, and the grim set of his jaw told her it was bad. What kind of situation? The kind where I need you to trust me even though you probably shouldn't. He stepped into the room. Get your medical bag, we're leaving in 5 minutes. Leaving? Going where? To do something incredibly stupid that might get us both killed. Dante's expression was dark. And I need you there because if this goes sideways, someone's going to need a nurse. Elena's stomach dropped. Dante, what? No time to explain. Just trust me. Please. The please got her. She'd never heard him say it before, never heard that note of urgency in his voice. Okay, she said, grabbing her bag, but you owe me an explanation. If we survive, I'll give you a whole damn book of explanations. He was already moving. Come on. They took a different car this time, something unmarked and nondescript. Dante drove himself, which told Elena that whatever they were doing, he didn't want witnesses. Where are we going? She asked as they left the estate. Into enemy territory. The Vitales have someone I need, someone who can give me information about who really ordered the hit on Marco. Dante's hands were tight on the wheel. But he's injured badly, and he won't survive transport to the estate. So you need me to stabilize him there. Exactly. This is insane. If the Vitales catch us, they won't. I have it planned out. Dante glanced at her. But if something goes wrong, if I tell you to run, you run. Understand? I'm not leaving you. That wasn't a request. If this falls apart, you get out. That's non-negotiable. Elena wanted to argue, but the look on his face stopped her. Fine. They drove in tense silence for another 20 minutes, heading into a part of the city Elena didn't recognize. Abandoned warehouses and empty lots, the kind of place where bad things happened and no one heard you scream. Dante pulled up behind one of the warehouses and killed the engine. Stay close. Don't speak unless I tell you to, and if shooting starts, hit the ground. Comforting. I'm not here to comfort you. I'm here to keep you alive. He pulled out a gun and checked it with practiced efficiency. Ready? No, but let's do this anyway. They moved through the shadows toward a door that looked rusted shut but opened smoothly when Dante tried it. Inside was darkness and the smell of blood and chemicals. Elena's medical training kicked in, cataloging scents, gunpowder, sweat, infection. This way, Dante whispered. They found the man in a back room, tied to a chair and barely conscious. He was young, maybe mid-20s, with a bullet wound in his shoulder that had clearly been there for days. The flesh around it was angry and red, infection setting in. You're the DeLuca, the man slurred when he saw Dante. Come to finish it? Come to make a deal. Dante crouched in front of him. You tell me who ordered the hit on my brother. I get you medical treatment and safe passage out of the city. You refuse, I leave you here to die slowly. They'll kill me if I talk. They'll kill you anyway. You failed the job, became a liability. You think the Vitales forgive failure? Dante's voice was cold. At least with me, you have a chance. The man looked at Elena, at her medical bag. She gonna fix me? If you talk, yes, Dante said. If you don't, she walks away and you die screaming. Elena wanted to protest, to say she'd help regardless. But she understood the game Dante was playing. Sometimes mercy had to be earned. The man's resistance crumbled. It was Carmine Vitale. He ordered the hit personally, said Marco was getting too powerful, too legitimate, said he needed to go before he got untouchable. Dante's expression didn't change, but Elena saw his hands clench. Who pulled the trigger? Guy named Sal Moretti. But he's dead now. Someone took him out 2 days ago. I know, I killed him myself. Dante stood. Anyone else involved? That's all I know, I swear. I was just the lookout. I didn't even fire a shot. Dante looked at Elena. Fix him. Elena moved forward, relief flooding through her. She worked quickly, cleaning the wound and administering antibiotics from her bag. The man winced and groaned, but stayed conscious. This needs proper hospital treatment, Elena said. I can stabilize him, but the infection's advanced. I'll get him to a hospital once we're clear. Dante cut the man's bonds. You run straight north. There's a clinic 3 blocks that way. They'll treat you, no questions. After that, you disappear. Leave the city. If I ever see you again, the deal's off. The man nodded shakily and stumbled out into the night. Dante and Elena left quickly, moving back to the car in tense silence. They were almost there when headlights flooded the alley. Down! Dante shoved Elena behind a dumpster as gunfire erupted. He returned fire, 3 precise shots that took out the first attacker. But there were more coming, voices shouting in Italian. We're pinned, Dante said, reloading. There's a fire escape on the building to your right. When I say go, you climb it and run. Don't look back. I'm not leaving, Base. Elena, for once in your life, just do what I tell you. His voice was desperate now. I'll hold them off. You run. Please. More gunfire. Dante took out another attacker, but they were closing in. Elena could see at least 4 more in the shadows. Go, Dante shouted. Elena ran. She climbed the fire escape with shaking hands, hearing gunfire below, and then she was on the roof and running. Behind her, the shooting continued. She wanted to go back, wanted to help, but she was unarmed and useless in a firefight. She made it 3 buildings over before collapsing behind a ventilation unit, gasping for breath and praying that Dante was still alive. 20 minutes later, she heard footsteps. Elena pressed herself against the metal, wishing she had a weapon, wishing she was anywhere else. Elena, Dante's voice. She almost cried with relief. He appeared around the ventilation unit, bloody and limping, but alive. You okay? Am I okay? You're bleeding. Flesh wound. I've had worse. He leaned against the unit, catching his breath. We need to move. They'll be searching. Elena helped him to his feet, slinging his arm over her shoulders. Can you make it? Don't have much choice. They made it back to the car through sheer stubbornness. Elena drove while Dante directed her through back streets and alleys, finally pulling into an underground garage she'd never seen before. Safe house, Dante explained. We'll wait here until it's clear to go back. Inside was a small apartment, basic but functional. Elena helped Dante to the couch and immediately started examining his injuries. The bullet had grazed his side. Painful, but not life-threatening. She cleaned and dressed it while he gritted his teeth. That was stupid, Elena said as she worked. That whole thing, incredibly, monumentally stupid. Got what I needed. You almost got killed. But I didn't. Dante looked at her, and something in his expression made her hands still. Because you were there. Because I knew I had to get back to make sure you got out safe. Elena's breath caught. Dante, oh, I'm not good at this, he interrupted, at caring about people. Marco was better at it. He could love without it destroying him. But me, I learned a long time ago that caring means losing, that the more you let someone matter, the more power they have to break you. Why are you telling me this? Because you matter, he said simply. I don't know when it happened or how. But somewhere between hating you and needing you and seeing you save people over and over, you started mattering, and that terrifies me. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She just stared at this complicated, damaged man who'd spent weeks making her feel like a burden and was now telling her she mattered. I'm scared too, she whispered, of this, of you, of everything. Dante's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. Then we're both idiots. Apparently, he kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't sweet. It was desperate and fierce and tasted like blood and survival and all the things they'd been holding back. Elena kissed him back with equal desperation, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer despite his injuries. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. This is a terrible idea, he said. The worst, Elena agreed. We should stop. Probably. Neither of them moved. They stayed there on the couch in the safe house, holding each other like they were the only solid things in a world that kept trying to destroy them. And Elena realized that somewhere along the way, she'd stopped being Marco's widow and started being something else entirely. She just didn't know what yet. They stayed in the safe house for 2 days while the heat died down. 2 days of Dante healing and Elena trying to process what had happened between them. That kiss had changed everything and nothing. They still barely knew how to talk to each other without fighting, but now there was something else underneath the tension. Something that made Elena's pulse quicken when Dante looked at her. We should talk about it, Elena said on the second morning, watching Dante check his weapons with methodical precision. About what? Don't do that. Don't pretend nothing happened. Dante's hands stilled on the gun. I'm not pretending. I'm just trying to figure out what the hell we do now. Do we have to do anything? Can it just be? Nothing just is in this life. Everything has consequences. He looked at her finally, his expression troubled. You were Marco's wife. You're under my protection, and I just crossed about a dozen lines that I swore I wouldn't cross. Elena moved closer, sitting on the edge of the table where he was working. What if I wanted you to cross them? That doesn't make it right. Since when do you care about right? The words came out sharper than she intended. You kill people, Dante. You run a criminal empire. You've done things that would horrify most people. But kissing me? That's where you draw the line? Yes, he said simply. Because everything else is part of the job. This is personal. And personal gets people killed. Elena wanted to argue, but she could see the fear underneath his resistance. Not fear of her, but fear of caring. Fear of what happened when you let someone matter in a world where everyone you loved became a target. So what do we do? She asked quietly. We go back. We pretend this didn't happen. We keep our distance. Dante's voice was firm, but his eyes told a different story. It's safer that way. For who? For both of us. Elena slid off the table and turned away, frustration burning in her chest. You know what? Fine. We'll pretend. We'll keep our distance. We'll be perfectly professional. She grabbed her jacket. But don't expect me to believe you actually want that. What I want doesn't matter. Of course it matters. You're the one making all the rules, deciding what happens, controlling everything. So what you want is the only thing that matters. That's not fair. None of this is fair. Elena spun back to face him. I didn't ask to be widowed. I didn't ask to be trapped in your world. I didn't ask to start having feelings for the man who spent weeks making me feel like garbage. But here we are, and pretending isn't going to change any of it. Dante stood, and the sudden movement made Elena take a step back. But he didn't advance, just stood there looking at her with an expression that was equal parts frustration and longing. You want to know what I want? His voice was rough. I want to not care about you. I want to look at you and see just another problem to solve. I want to not think about what happens if you get hurt because of me. He moved closer. But I can't, because somewhere in the last few weeks, you became more than Marco's widow. You became someone I actually give a damn about. And that scares me more than any war or enemy ever could. Elena's breath caught. Dante, but that doesn't change reality. I'm still responsible for what happened to my brother. I'm still the head of a family at war, and you're still the woman he married, the woman I'm supposed to protect. Not, he stopped, running a hand through his hair in frustration. Not what? Not kiss? Not care about? Elena closed the distance between them. I'm a grown woman, Dante. I can make my own choices. And I'm choosing this. Whatever this is. You don't know what you're choosing? Then tell me. Explain it to me. Stop making decisions for me and actually talk to me like an equal. Dante looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so gentle it made Elena's chest ache. If we do this, he said quietly, if we cross this line for real, there's no going back. People will talk. They'll question your loyalty, my judgment. Some will think you seduced me for power. Others will think I took advantage of you. Either way, it gets ugly. I don't care what people think. You say that now. But when they look at you like you're a traitor or a whore, when they whisper behind your back, when they use it against us, you'll care. Elena took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. Then we deal with it, together. You're not hearing me. This isn't some romance where love conquers all. This is a world where caring about someone makes them a target, where showing weakness gets you killed. His grip tightened on her hand. I couldn't protect Marco. What makes you think I can protect you? Maybe I don't need you to protect me. Maybe I just need you to be honest about what you want. I want you safe. That's what I want. That's not what I meant, and you know it. Dante pulled her closer, his free hand coming up to cup her face. I want you, he admitted, his voice raw. I've wanted you since before the wedding, since the first time Marco brought you to the estate, and you looked at me like you weren't afraid. I've wanted you every day since, and hated myself for it. The confession hit Elena like a physical blow. Before the wedding? Yeah, that's why I couldn't stand to look at you. Why I was so angry when Marco went through with it. Dante's thumb brushed her cheek. Because you were supposed to be mine first, and then you were his. And then he was dead, and you were just there. This constant reminder of everything I couldn't have. Oh my God, Elena breathed. That's what you meant. When you said you saw me first. I shouldn't have told you that. I was half dead and not thinking straight. But you meant it. Yeah, I meant it. He rested his forehead against hers. So now you know. Now you understand why this is so complicated. Why I can't just... Elena kissed him, cutting off whatever rationalization he was building. This kiss was different from the first, slower, deeper, more certain. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante's resistance had visibly crumbled. We're going to regret this, he said. Probably, but I'm tired of living in regret. Elena met his eyes. I spent weeks regretting my choices, regretting the marriage, regretting surviving when Marco didn't. I'm done with that. I want to choose something for myself, even if it's messy and complicated and potentially disastrous. You're choosing me? After everything I've done? Everything I put you through? I'm choosing the man who saved Gabriella, who protects Sophia, who gave me purpose when I had nothing, who kisses me like I matter. Elena's voice was steady. Yeah, you've been cruel. Yeah, you've hurt me. But you've also shown me more truth than anyone else in this world, and I'd rather have complicated and real than easy and fake. Dante kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back. They stumbled toward the bedroom, hands and mouths urgent, months of denial and tension finally breaking free. Later, lying tangled together in the dark, Elena traced the scars on Dante's chest. There were more than she'd expected: knife wounds, bullet wounds, burns, a roadmap of violence written on his skin. "Tell me about them," she said quietly. "Which one?" "All of them. I want to know what you've survived." So he did. Each scar had a story, some from fights, some from betrayals, one from the attack that had killed his father. Dante's voice was matter-of-fact, but Elena could hear the pain underneath. All the times he'd been hurt, all the times he'd barely survived. And this one? She touched the scar on his face, the one that pulled at his mouth. "I was 19. Someone tried to send Marco a message by carving it into me." Dante's jaw tightened at the memory. Marco hunted them down personally, made them suffer for weeks before he finally let them die. "He loved you." "Yeah, he did." There was grief in those words, finally. "He was the only family I had left, and I let him die." "You didn't let him die. You couldn't have known." "I should have known. I should have seen it coming." Dante's eyes were haunted. "That's my job, to see the threats, to protect the family, and I failed." Elena shifted to look at him directly. "You know that's not true, right? You know it's not your fault?" "Knowing and believing are different things." "Then let me believe it for both of us." She kissed him softly. "You did everything you could, and now you're doing everything you can to make it right. That has to count for something." Dante pulled her close, his face buried in her hair. "I don't deserve you." "Good thing I'm not asking what you deserve. I'm asking what you want." "I want this, you, even though it's reckless and dangerous and probably the worst decision either of us could make." "Then we're in agreement." They stayed in the safe house one more night, stealing time in a bubble where the outside world couldn't reach them. But reality was waiting, and when they finally drove back to the estate the next morning, the weight of what they'd started settled over both of them. "We need rules," Dante said as they pulled through the gates. "Boundaries." "What kind of boundaries?" "In public, we're professional, boss and employee, nothing more." He parked the car. "What happens between us stays private. The men can't know." "Not yet. Maybe not ever." Elena wanted to argue, but she understood. This world had different rules, different expectations. "Okay, professional in public. And you still do your job. You're still the medic. That doesn't change." "I wouldn't want it to." Dante looked at her, something vulnerable in his expression. "I'm not good at this. At relationships. At letting people in. I'm going to mess up. Push you away when I should pull you closer. Say things I don't mean because I'm scared." "I know, and I'm probably going to call you out on it every time." "Good." He reached across the console and took her hand. "Don't let me get away with my bullshit. Marco did, and it made me worse." "Deal." They went inside separately, keeping their distance like nothing had changed. But everything had changed, and Elena could feel it in the way Dante's eyes followed her, in the small smile he hid when he thought no one was looking. That afternoon, Vincent called them both to the command center. "We have confirmation," he said, pulling up surveillance photos. "Carmine Vitale is planning a major move. He's consolidating power, taking over the smaller families. If we don't stop him now, he'll be unstoppable in 6 months." Dante studied the photos, his expression cold and calculating. "What's the plan?" "Hit him before he can hit us. Take out his infrastructure, his supply lines, his support system, cut him off at the knees." Vincent looked grim. "It'll be a bloodbath. But if we do it right, we end this war in one move." "Casualties?" Dante asked. "High. On both sides. But we have the element of surprise." Dante was quiet, thinking. Elena watched him calculate the cost, weigh the options. This was the man who ran an empire, cold, strategic, willing to do what was necessary. "Do it," Dante said finally. "But surgical strikes only. No civilians, no collateral damage. We hit military targets only. That limits our options." "I don't care. We're not the Vitalis. We don't terrorize innocents to make a point." Dante's voice was firm. "We do this clean, or we don't do it at all." Vincent nodded and left to make preparations. "You're planning a war," Elena said quietly when they were alone. "I'm planning to end one. There's a difference." "Is there? People will still die." "Yeah, they will. But fewer than if we let this drag out for years." Dante looked at her. "I know you don't like it. I know it goes against everything you believe in, but this is who I am, what I do." "I know." Elena moved closer. "I'm not asking you to change. I'm scared. For you. For what happens if this goes wrong." "It won't go wrong. I won't let it." But 3 days later, everything went wrong. The raid was supposed to be quick and clean, take out Carmine's main operations, scatter his forces, end the threat. Instead, it turned into a massacre when the Vitales were waiting for them. Someone had talked. Someone had warned them. Dante came back covered in blood, 3 of his men dead, 2 more critically injured. Elena worked for hours trying to save them, but 1 didn't make it. The other would probably never walk again. "Who betrayed us?" she asked when it was over, when the medical bay was finally clean and quiet. "I don't know yet, but I'll find out." Dante's voice was ice. "And when I do, they'll wish they'd never been born." The investigation took 2 weeks. 2 weeks of paranoia and suspicion, of Dante interrogating his own men, of trust shattering throughout the organization. Elena watched him spiral, watched the darkness take over, watched him become someone she barely recognized. "You need to stop," she said one night when she found him in his office at 3 a.m., files spread everywhere. "You're destroying yourself." "Someone in my own family betrayed me. Betrayed Marco's memory. I can't stop until I find them." "Yes, you can. You're not sleeping. You're barely eating. You're going to collapse." "Then I collapse. At least I'll collapse knowing I did everything I could." Elena grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "You're no good to anyone dead, and you're heading there fast." "I don't care." "Well, I do." Her voice broke. "I care, Dante. So stop being an idiot and take care of yourself." Something in her tone got through. Dante's shoulders slumped, exhaustion finally showing through. "I don't know how to stop." "Then let me help you." She pulled him away from the desk, led him to his room, made him lie down. She didn't leave, just lay beside him until his breathing evened out and he finally slept. When he woke 8 hours later, he looked more human. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You don't have to thank me. That's what—" Elena stopped, realizing what she'd been about to say. "That's what?" Dante prompted. "That's what people do when they care about each other." Dante pulled her closer. "I care about you too. More than I should. More than is safe. Then we'll just have to be unsafe together." The traitor was found 2 days later. One of Marco's oldest guards, a man who'd been with the family for 20 years. He'd been feeding information to the Vitales for months, ever since they'd threatened his daughter. "I didn't want to," the man sobbed when Dante confronted him. "But they had my little girl. They said they'd kill her if I didn't cooperate." Dante's expression was stone. "You could have come to me. I would have protected her." "I was scared. I didn't know what to do." "So you betrayed us, got my men killed, nearly destroyed everything Marco built." Dante's voice was dead calm, which was somehow worse than rage. "Give me one reason I shouldn't put a bullet in your head right now." The man had no answer. Elena watched from the doorway, her stomach churning. She knew what was coming, knew Dante had to make an example, but she also knew that man had been trying to protect his daughter, the same way Dante protected Sofia, the same way anyone would protect the people they loved. "Dante," she said quietly. He turned, and the look in his eyes was dangerous. "Don't." "His daughter is safe. I already had my people extract her. She's at a secure location, unharmed." Dante turned back to the traitor. "Which is more mercy than you deserve, but I'm not the Vitales. I don't punish children for their parents' mistakes." Relief flooded the man's face. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm still going to kill you." "No," Elena said, stepping forward. "There's another way." Dante's jaw tightened. "Elena, stay out of this." He made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but he did it to save his daughter. That doesn't excuse it, but it matters. It should matter. It doesn't, not in this world. Then change the world. Elena moved to stand beside Dante. You said you wanted to be better than the Vitales. Prove it. Show mercy. Mercy makes us look weak. Mercy makes you look human. Elena met his eyes. And right now, your men need to see that you're still human, that you haven't become the thing you're fighting against. The silence stretched. The traitor watched them with desperate hope. Dante's hand was on his gun, his expression torn between rage and something else. Finally, he spoke. You have two choices. You leave the city tonight, take your daughter, disappear. I never see you again. Or you stay, and I make an example of you that will terrify every potential traitor for the next decade. I'll go. I'll disappear. I swear. If I ever hear your name again, if you ever come back, the deal's off. Your daughter stays safe, but you die slowly. Understand? The man nodded frantically. Get out of my sight. He actually ran from the room like the devil was chasing him. When they were alone, Dante turned to Elena. You undermined me in front of a traitor. I gave you a chance to be the man I know you can be. And if that makes me look weak, if other people think they can betray me and get away with it, then you deal with them too. But at least you'll know you tried mercy first. Elena touched his arm. You're not your father, Dante. You're not Marco either. You get to decide what kind of leader you want to be. Dante pulled her close, his face buried in her hair. You're going to be the death of me. Or the making of you. Same thing in this life. With the traitor gone and Carmine Vitale's operations in shambles, the war started to wind down. Not ended, but contained. Manageable. Dante used the breathing room to consolidate power, to make strategic alliances, to slowly shift the family's business toward more legitimate ventures. Marco's dream, Vincent said one day, looking at the plans. He wanted to go legit. You're actually doing it. Not all the way. We'll never be completely clean. Dante glanced at Elena, who was organizing medical supplies across the room. But maybe we can be clean enough. It took 3 more months before the fragile peace solidified. 3 months of negotiations and compromises and strategic maneuvering. 3 months of Dante and Elena hiding what they were to each other, stealing moments in the dark, pretending in public that they were nothing more than boss and employee. Until the day Sofia came to visit. Elena was in the medical bay when she heard the commotion. Children's laughter, rare and precious in this house of violence. She went to investigate and found Sofia running through the halls with Dante chasing her, both of them laughing. I'm faster than you, Uncle Dante, Sofia crowed. Not for long. Dante scooped her up, spinning her around while she shrieked with delight. Elena watched from the doorway, something warm and painful blooming in her chest. This was Dante without the armor, without the cold calculation. Just a man who loved his niece and would do anything to keep her safe. Sofia spotted Elena and waved. Elena, did you see? I beat Uncle Dante in a race. I saw. You're very fast. Elena came closer, smiling. How have you been, sweetheart? Good. Nonna lets me have ice cream every day. Sofia wiggled out of Dante's arms and grabbed Elena's hand. Are you Uncle Dante's girlfriend now? The question dropped like a bomb. Dante froze. Elena's smile faltered. What makes you think that? Elena asked carefully. Because Uncle Dante smiles when he talks about you. He never smiles about anyone except me and Papa. Sofia's expression was serious. And Nonna says that when a boy smiles about a girl, it means he likes her. Nonna talks too much, Dante muttered. Do you like Elena? Sofia asked him directly. Dante looked at Elena, something vulnerable in his eyes. They'd been hiding for months, pretending, keeping secrets. And here was this 6-year-old cutting through all the lies with brutal honesty. Yeah, Dante said finally. I like her. Good. Sofia nodded like that settled it. Papa would have wanted you to be happy. He told me that before he went away. He said Uncle Dante needed someone to make him smile. Elena felt tears burn her eyes. Marco had known, had seen what was there before either of them had acknowledged it. Your papa was a smart man, Elena said softly. The smartest. Sofia looked between them. So can you be boyfriend and girlfriend now, in front of everyone? Because secrets are bad. Out of the mouths of babes, Vincent said from the doorway, grinning. The kid's got a point. Dante glared at him. How long have you been standing there? Long enough. And before you ask, yeah, Most of us have known for months. You're not as subtle as you think." Vincent's expression turned serious. "For what it's worth, the men respect it. You've been good for each other, made him less of a bastard," he said to Elena. "I'm still a bastard," Dante protested. "Yeah, but now you're a bastard with a conscience. That's progress." Vincent left, still grinning. Dante looked at Elena. "So much for keeping it secret." "Maybe secrets aren't the answer anyway." Elena took his hand in front of Sophia, in front of anyone who might be watching. "Maybe we just be honest about what this is." "And what is this?" "I don't know yet, but I want to find out." She smiled. "What do you say? Ready to scandalize the entire organization?" "Been ready since the day you kissed me in that safe house." Dante pulled her close, kissed her in front of Sophia and whoever else might see. "Let them talk. I'm done hiding." Sophia cheered like they'd just announced something wonderful, and maybe they had. Over the next months, things shifted. The whispers and gossip that Dante had predicted came, but they were quieter than expected. Most people seemed relieved that Dante had found something, someone, that made him more human. And Elena's work in the medical bay had earned her enough respect that few dared question her openly. The bigger change came in how Dante ran the family. He started making different choices, still ruthless when he needed to be, but more measured, more willing to find solutions that didn't involve bloodshed. Elena liked to think she had something to do with that, but she knew the truth was more complicated. Dante was choosing to be different because he wanted to be, not because she'd changed him. A year after Marco's death, Elena stood in the cemetery looking at his grave. She came every month, brought flowers, said a quiet thank you to the man who'd inadvertently given her a life she never could have imagined. "I think he'd approve," Dante said, coming to stand beside her. "Of us. Of how things turned out." "You think?" "Marco always said I needed someone who'd call me on my bullshit. He just never expected it to be his widow." Dante's mouth quirked. Though knowing Marco, he probably planned it somehow. He was manipulative like that. Elena laughed softly. "I don't think anyone could have planned this." "No, this was pure chaos." Dante took her hand. "The good kind, though." They stood in comfortable silence, honoring the man who'd brought them together through his death. Elena thought about how different her life might have been if that wedding night had gone differently. If Marco had lived, if they'd built a marriage, if she'd never seen the complicated, damaged man standing beside her now. She couldn't say she was glad Marco had died. That would be monstrous. But she could say that she'd found something real in the aftermath, something worth fighting for. "I have something for you," Dante said, breaking the silence. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Elena's heart jumped. "Dante, it's not what you think. Open it." Inside was a key. "What's this?" "Key to the medical bay. Your medical bay." Dante's expression was carefully neutral. "I'm putting you in charge. Full autonomy, full budget, full authority to run it however you want. You want to treat people outside the family, people who need help and can't afford it, you do it. No questions asked." Elena stared at the key, at the trust it represented. "You're giving me control over part of your operation. I'm giving you the means to do what you do best, save people." Dante shrugged. "Consider it an investment in my soul. Maybe if you save enough people, it'll balance out all the ones I've—" He stopped. "All the ones you've killed," Elena finished quietly. "That's not how it works." "I know, but it's something." Elena closed her fingers around the key. "Thank you. This means thank you. Don't thank me yet. You're going to work yourself to death running that place." "Probably, but at least I'll die doing something that matters." Dante pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. "Don't die. I've gotten used to having you around." "That's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me." "I'm working on it. Give me time." They left the cemetery hand in hand, driving back to the estate that had become home. Elena thought about the terrified girl who'd walked down the aisle a year ago, who'd married a stranger for her family's safety, who'd thought that was the end of her story. She'd been so wrong. That had just been the beginning. In the months that followed, Elena transformed the medical bay into something more. A clinic that served not just Dante's men, but anyone who needed help. Gang members and civilians, criminals and victims, everyone treated equally. Some of the old guard grumbled, but Dante backed her completely, and that was enough to silence most objections. Sophia visited more often, splitting time between her grandmother and the estate. She latched onto Elena, calling her Aunt Elena, and insisting she be included in everything. Elena had never wanted children of her own, but having Sophia in her life felt right. Felt like family in a way she hadn't expected. And Dante? Dante slowly learned how to let her in, how to share the burdens instead of carrying them alone, how to be vulnerable without seeing it as weakness. It wasn't easy. They fought constantly, their personalities too strong to avoid conflict. But they always came back together, always found their way through the fights to something stronger on the other side. 2 years after Marco's death, Dante called a family meeting. Elena stood beside him in the command center, facing the gathered leadership. Some were old guard from Marco's time, others were new, brought in by Dante. All of them knew about Elena, about her relationship with Dante, about the unusual role she'd carved out in the organization. "We're making changes," Dante announced. "Big ones. Over the next 5 years, we're transitioning out of all illegal operations. Drugs, gambling, protection rackets, all of it. We're going legitimate." The room erupted. Voices raised in protest, in shock and disbelief. Dante let them talk for 30 seconds, then held up his hand. The room fell silent. "This isn't a discussion, this is happening. Marco wanted it, I want it, and we're making it happen." His voice was hard, brooking no argument. "Anyone who can't get on board with that can leave now with full severance. No hard feelings." No one moved. "Good. Vincent will handle the transition details. We start with the drug operations, move to gambling, end with the protection rackets. By the time we're done, the DeLuca name will be clean, or as clean as it can be given our history." After the meeting, Vincent pulled Elena aside. "This is your doing, isn't it?" "No, this is Dante's choice. Made because of you, because you gave him something to build toward besides revenge and violence." Vincent smiled. "Marco would be proud of both of you." Elena hoped that was true, hoped that wherever Marco was, he could see that his death hadn't been meaningless, that it had sparked something that would eventually save the family he'd loved. The transition took 3 years. 3 years of careful planning, strategic exits, legitimizing dirty money through clean businesses. 3 years of resistance from those who didn't want to change, of threats from rival families who saw the DeLucas going soft. But Dante held firm, and Elena stood beside him through all of it. On the 4th anniversary of Marco's death, Dante took Elena back to the cemetery. Sophia came with them this time, old enough now to understand more of what had happened. "Do you miss him?" Sophia asked Elena while Dante placed flowers on the grave. "I didn't know him long enough to really miss him," Elena answered honestly. "But I'm grateful to him for giving me a path to this life, even if it wasn't the one he intended. He'd like that you make Uncle Dante happy. He used to worry about him being alone." "Your uncle's not very good at being alone." "No one is," Sophia said wisely. "That's why we need family." Elena pulled her close. "Yeah, that's exactly why." That night, in the privacy of Dante's room, he handed Elena another small box. "Please don't tell me this is another key," she said. "Open it." Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, a single diamond that caught the light. Elena's breath stopped. "Dante, I know we can't do it officially. I know a wedding would raise too many questions, bring up too many complications." Dante took the ring out, held it between them. "But I want you to have this anyway, as a promise, that you're mine and I'm yours, and nothing's going to change that." "Are you asking me to marry you?" "I'm asking you to be my partner. In everything, the business, the family, this life we're building." He slipped the ring onto her finger. "Marry me in every way that matters, even if we can't make it legal." Elena looked at the ring, at this man who'd started as her enemy and become everything. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." They didn't have a ceremony, didn't need one, but that night felt like vows anyway, promises made in the dark, witnessed only by each other and the complicated history that had brought them together. 5 years after Marco's death, the DeLuca family was unrecognizable. All illegal operations shut down, legitimate businesses thriving. The family name associated with construction, real estate, charitable foundations instead of crime and violence. It wasn't perfect. There were still enemies, still threats, still moments when Dante had to be the hard man he'd always been. But it was better. Cleaner. Closer to the dream Marco had died trying to achieve. Elena ran 3 free clinics now, treating thousands of patients a year. She'd become a fixture in the community, respected and trusted. Some people still whispered about her past, about the wedding night massacre, and her relationship with Dante. But most had moved on, accepted her for the work she did rather than the history she carried. And Dante had found something close to peace. He'd never be soft, never be easy. But he'd learned how to channel his intensity into building instead of destroying, how to lead without ruling through fear, how to love without seeing it as weakness. Elena found him one evening on the balcony overlooking the estate grounds. He was watching Sofia play in the gardens with some friends, a small smile on his scarred face. "What are you thinking about?" Elena asked, sliding her arms around him from behind. "How different everything is. How different I am." Dante covered her hands with his. "I used to think caring about people made you weak, that love was just another word for vulnerability. And now I think it's the only thing that makes any of this worth it." He turned to face her. "You, Sofia, the family we're building, that's what matters. Not the power or the money or the respect, just this." Elena kissed him, soft and certain. "Took you long enough to figure that out." "Yeah, well, I'm a slow learner. Worth the wait, though." "You think?" "I know." Elena looked out at the estate, at the life they'd built from the ashes of tragedy. "We did it, you know. We turned something terrible into something good. That's not nothing." "No," Dante agreed. "That's everything." They stood together as the sun set, 2 people who'd found each other in the darkest circumstances and chosen to build light. It wasn't the story either of them had expected to live, but it was theirs, messy and complicated and real. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Sofia ran up to the balcony, breathless and grinning. "Uncle Dante! Elena! Come play with us!" "We're too old for playing," Dante protested. "You're never too old for playing, that's what Nonna says." Sofia grabbed both their hands. "Come on!" Elena laughed and let herself be pulled along, Dante grumbling but following anyway. They played in the gardens as the sun finished setting, and Elena thought about how far they'd come. From a widow and the brother who'd hated her, to this, partners in every sense, building a future that honored the past without being trapped by it. She'd been traded as payment for a debt, married to a stranger, widowed in hours. She'd been locked away, used, dismissed, underestimated. But she'd also found purpose, found strength, found love in the least likely place. And she'd learned that sometimes the worst moments of your life were just the beginning of something you never could have imagined. Sometimes the man who looked at you with hatred was the one who'd end up seeing you most clearly. Sometimes tragedy was just transformation waiting to unfold. Elena had entered this world as a pawn. She'd leave it as a queen, not because someone gave her that power, but because she'd claimed it for herself. One choice at a time, one fight at a time, one moment of refusing to be broken at a time. And the man beside her, scarred and dangerous and surprisingly capable of tenderness, he'd made his own transformation. From the angry, violent brother living in Marco's shadow to a leader who chose mercy when he could, who built instead of destroyed, who learned that strength wasn't the absence of feeling, but the courage to feel anyway. Together, they'd turned a crime empire into something that could almost be called honorable. They'd saved lives, protected the innocent, given Sofia a future that wasn't defined by violence. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was theirs. And in this world of shadows and complications, of impossible choices and heavy consequences, that was more than enough. That was everything.